regard for you, but it is a necessity to which we are reduced, and I recommend it to you as a matter of the very best policy. Time,' said Mr Witherden, pulling out his watch, 'in a business like this is exceedingly precious. Favour us with your decision as speedily as possible, ma'am.' With a smile upon her face, and looking at each of the three by turns, Miss Brass took 2 or 3 more pinches of snuff, and having by this time very little left, travelled round and round the box with her forefinger and thumb, scraping up another. Having disposed of this likewise, and put the box carefully in her pocket, she said, 'I am to accept or reject at once, am I?' 'Yes,' said Mr Witherden. The charming creature was opening her lips to speak in reply, when the door was hastily opened too, and the head of Sampson Brass was thrust into the room. 'Excuse me,' said the gentleman hastily. 'Wait a bit.' So saying, and quite indifferent to the astonishment his presence occasioned, he crept in, shut the door, kissed his greasy glove as servilely as if it were the dust, and made a most abject bow. 'Sarah,' said Brass, 'hold your tongue, if you please, and let me speak. Gentlemen, if I could express the pleasure it gives me to see 3 such men in a happy unity of feeling and concord of sentiment, I think you would hardly believe me. But though I am unfortunate, nay, gentlemen, criminal, if we are to use harsh expressions in a company like this, still I have my feelings like other men. I have heard of a poet who remarked that feelings were the common lot of all. If he could have been a pig, gentlemen, and have uttered that sentiment, he would still have been immortal.' 'If you're not an idiot,' said Miss Brass harshly, 'hold your peace.' 'Sarah, my dear,' returned her brother, 'thank you. But I know what I am about, my love, and will take the liberty of expressing myself accordingly. Mr Witherden, sir, your handkerchief is hanging out of your pocket. Would you allow me to—' As Mr Brass advanced to remedy this accident, the notary shrunk from him with an air of disgust. Brass, who over and above his usual prepossessing qualities had a scratched face, a green shade over one eye, and a hat grievously crushed, stopped short, and looked round with a pitiful smile. 'He shuns me,' said Sampson, 'even when I would, as I may say, heap coals of fire upon his head. Well, I am a falling house, and the rats, if I may be allowed the expression in reference to a gentleman I respect and love beyond everything, fly from me. Gentlemen, regarding your conversation just now, I happened to see my sister on her way here, and wondering where she could be going to, and being, may I venture to say, naturally of a suspicious turn, followed her. Since then, I have been listening.' 'If you're not mad,' interposed Miss Sally, 'stop there, and say no more.' 'Sarah, my dear,' rejoined Brass with undiminished politeness, 'I thank you kindly, but will still proceed. Mr Witherden, sir, as we have the honour to be members of the same profession, to say nothing of that other gentleman having been my lodger, and having partaken, as one may say, of the hospitality of my roof, I think you might have given me the refusal of this offer in the first instance. I do indeed. Now, my dear sir,' cried Brass, seeing that the notary was about to interrupt him, 'suffer me to speak, I beg.' Mr Witherden was silent, and Brass went on. 'If you will do me the favour,' he said, holding up the green shade, and revealing an eye most horribly discoloured, 'to look at this, you will naturally inquire in your own minds, how did I get it? If you look from that to my face, you will wonder what could have been the cause of all those scratches. And if from them to my hat, how it came into the state in which you see it, gentlemen,' said Brass, striking the hat fiercely with his clenched hand. 'To all these questions I answer, Quilp.' The three gentlemen looked at each other, but said nothing. 'I say,' pursued Brass, glancing aside at his sister, as though he were talking for her information, and speaking with a snarling malignity in violent contrast to his usual smoothness, 'that I answer to all these questions, Quilp, Quilp, who deludes me into his infernal den, and takes a delight in looking on and chuckling while I scorch and burn and bruise and maim myself, Quilp, who never once, no, never once in all our communications together has treated me otherwise than as a dog, Quilp, whom I have always hated with my whole heart, but never so much as lately. He gives me the cold shoulder on this very matter, as if he had had nothing to do with it, instead of being the first to propose it. I can't trust him. In one of his howling, raving, blazing humours, I believe he'd let it out, if it was murder, and never think of himself so long as he could terrify me. Now,' said Brass, picking up his hat again, and replacing the shade over his eye, and actually crouching down in the excess of his civility, 'what does all this lead to? What should you say it led me to, gentlemen? Could you guess at all near the mark?' Nobody spoke. Brass stood smirking for a little while, as if he had propounded some choice conundrum, and then said, 'To be short with you, then, it leads me to this. If the truth has come out, as it plainly has, in a manner that there's no standing up against, and a very sublime and grand thing is truth, gentlemen, in its way, though, like other sublime and grand things, such as thunderstorms and that, we're not always over and above glad to see it, I had better turn upon this man than let this man turn upon me. It's clear to me that I am done for. Therefore, if anybody is to split, I had better be the person, and have the advantage of it. Sarah, my dear, comparatively speaking, you're safe. I relate these circumstances for my own profit.' With that, Mr Brass, in a great hurry, revealed the whole story, bearing as heavily as possible on his amiable employer, and making himself out to be rather a saint-like and holy character, though subject, he acknowledged, to human weaknesses. He concluded thus: 'Now, gentlemen, I am not a man who does things by halves. Being in for a penny, I am ready, as the saying is, to be in for a pound. You must do with me what you please, and take me where you please. If you wish to have this in writing, we'll reduce it into manuscript immediately. You will be tender with me, I am sure. I am quite confident you'll be tender with me. You are men of honour, and have feeling hearts. I yielded from necessity to Quilp, for though necessity has no law, she has her lawyers. I yield to you from necessity too, from policy besides, and because of feelings that have been a pretty long time working within me. Punish Quilp, gentlemen. Weigh heavily upon him. Grind him down. Tread him under foot. He has done as much by me for many and many a day.' Having now arrived at the conclusion of his discourse, Sampson checked the current of his wrath, kissed his glove again, and smiled as only parasites and cowards can. 'And this,' said Miss Brass, raising her head, with which she had hitherto sat resting on her hands, and surveying him from head to foot with a bitter sneer, 'this is my brother, is it? This is my brother that I have worked and toiled for, and believed to have had something of the man in him.